Hi there. Good evening. For anybody who doesn't know already, my name's Alan, Alan Parry. I'm one of the co-founding editors of the Broken Spine Artist Collective, alongside Paul Robert Mullen, an old friend of mine. This event tonight is to launch my debut poetry chapbook, Neon Ghosts, which I'm going to be reading from. Um, The collection was inspired by some artwork by a gentleman named Stuart Davis and perhaps a more familiar Edward Hopper. Hi Matthew, I can see you there popping up on my screen. Um, and also by an album called Jazz at Massey Hall, which featured a performance by the quintet. So Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, Charles Mingus, and Max Roach. I hope that you can see some of those influences or hear some of them influences as I read the poems from my collection for you. So this first poem is called Grief, Lust, Music, which was published in the inaugural edition of Black Poetry magazine. And it's the first poem in this collection because it's where it all began, really. Okay. The night brings grief, lust, music, dusty in Memphis. I pour whiskey, another, sitting in shadows anchored by thoughts, desperate for relief, knowing the curves of your hips by memory, drunk, images fade, the record ends, and sleep. Okay, so I'm just going to read these. I'll introduce each poem individually with a title, and where I see fit, I'll give you a little bit of a preamble. The next poem is The Scene, which, like I said at the top, is inspired by the work of Stuart Davis in particular. I want to see the America Stuart Davis knew. Gas pumps, rooftops, skyscrapers in technicolor, jazz, impulsive soul in full swing. And this third poem is a poem called Massey Hall. Like I say, is inspired by that album, by that jazz quintet, seminal album, and something that I was listening to a lot of the time of writing. Restless wasps, children at the pool, aimless pottering, quarrels, restored harmony, snatches of birdsong, constant chatter, muted laughter. This is a poem called called Pop in the Minor Key, which is a title taken from some of the things that you will hear on Later Live with Jules Holland, people like Adele. Um, this is sort of my response to it. The undressed piano, muted trumpets, strutting bass and brushed drums, balance, her husky, soulful song swaying lazily between licks and lines, coquettishly toying with pearls, offbeat in the pocket. And the next poem in the collection um, is entitled Neon Ghosts. I think this one really paints the scene for of the America, the unattainable America, I call it, the America of the past that we can't quite reach, and that of the future that we just can't touch. an America that perhaps we all think we know through movies, music, and literature. Some neon ghosts. Through the rain-spattered hotel window, the city is blurred. Featureless figures march hurriedly in the soft electric light. Suffused neon ghosts. On the television, rolling news regurgitates stories about a congressman with a bent for children. I listen to the hot maul of the shower, think about joining you, but we have a reservation. Outside, tires screech like tomcats, and my mind goes to the movies. Okay, I'm going to read a poem now called Primal, and I will give a warning that I will drop an F-bomb in this poem. So just in case there's anybody that's out there a little bit younger listening, he possesses an ire like a crowing heath, fitful outbreaks between melancholy thoughts and high spirits, vagaries and feral needs, a lust for relief, full of liquor, haunting bars, craving shoulders on which to lean, ears to bend, women to fuck. So this next poem, Old Friends, like I say, I'm just going to read through the whole collection. I shan't keep you too long. They're only short pieces, you might have gathered that by now. It's a little bit of a change in mood. It's more personal. Um, it's about an old friend of mine called Richard, who's no longer with us. So, for Richard, we spent the night hours driving to no place new. Tree-lined avenues of this old town by the sea, wide pavements and coffee shops. But there is nothing here for young men, no art. We wanted more. Sat on the bonnet of his car under the blushing moon, watching across the bay, smoking cigarettes, plotting our escape. Somewhere different, more like Paris. This poem is called 10 Years is Too Long. It's another poem about friendship and how, for whatever reason, people don't keep in touch like they used to. People become busy, move on, have families. It's always nice to get back in touch. The distance between us is sewn into the creases on your face, laughter I missed, and the grey in my beard, worries that I never shared, but what does this matter when we shake hands and embrace? Some things never change, do they? I think it was April 2019, I had the good fortune of going to watch one of my favourite bands, The Specials, in a semi-official capacity, writing for Planet Slop. Um, on the way back from the venue into Liverpool City Centre, this poem sort of came to mind, and it was written relatively quickly afterwards, or certainly fragments of it were. This poem is called Getting the Band Back Together. It's for men of a certain age. The Olympia doors open and spill out like lentils, steam rising from their shoulders into the chill. A taxi now. Driver working long into the morning to pay for study. He says he wishes he had been inside. I didn't know they were back together. The meter stops at £6 and they give him 10. And step out into the artificial city lights, a woman singing karaoke, security everywhere. On the main drag, the stench of spilled beer and guts. They follow a hen party, wearing dresses, revealing potato white flesh, rambling boys of pleasure and ladies of easy leisure. Inside, two groups converge, strong women looking for a good time, men, desire in their eyes, looking for anything, posing, posturing, laughing, hardening, realizing it's time to go home to their own. If anybody who is following my sort of writing career or read any interviews or listened to me speak before will probably know that my love for poetry goes back to probably 8, 9, 10 years old, and my dad speaking to me at length about the importance of song lyrics. And you may well have picked up on the line "Rambling boys of pleasure and ladies of easy leisure" in that last poem, which came from a track by the Pogues, which I learned very, very early on. So thank you, Dad. Again, I said at the top that some of the poems in this collection were inspired by the artwork of Stuart Davis, but not just Stuart Davis, the paintings of Edward Hopper. Edward Hopper's image of America is solitary, in my opinion. There are lots of looking through windows, letterboxes, private situations. This poem's called Behind Closed Doors. Stiff men sit in starched white shirts, and the television rumbles on, illuminating the room. Coffee table books are piled high, unloved. Next door there is dancing and cocktails, the walls thin, endless records playing, steaming vat of pasta and sauce, shared stories repeated, always laughter. A girl with red hair kisses a boy for the first time on the stairs. And I'll leave that image there. This is a poem called Beautiful Boy. I think it's quite an important poem. Whether it's my story to tell at this time, I'm not so sure. But I think it's a story probably that does need to be told. A high and tight fade, widow's peak, a black and white button down Ben Sherman, drainpipe jeans, blood red boots, expensive cologne, her costume complete. Now, this poem that I'm going to read now is called God. If I remember right, this is a poem that was also published, yeah, by Blackbird Poetry approximately 12 months ago. It's also one of the first poems that I read live to an audience when I read it to my fellow students on my PGCE, sorry, cohort. It's called God. Under the sun that makes the river run hot, he suffers naked desires. Days spent watching women walk under speechless green trees, flooding him with violent rapture, a criminal lust. He looks like God cut from rock, golden, and they cannot tell him no. So a lot of my poetry in this collection specifically is about is about these American scenes, and it's inspired by people like Jack Kerouac and William S. Burroughs and Charles Bukowski. But there's an awful lot, I think, in my writing of your Barry Hineses and Alan Bennett's and people of that nature. This poem, 1530, is distinctly British, I would say. At the crossing, young daughters in green pencil skirts and high socks hold their knees close, protecting modesty from libertine boys standing opposite every day. Shopkeeper waits nearby, watching on, guarding. I've got a couple of poems now, a little bit out of character for me. They're about relationships. Make of them what you will. This first poem, In My Wake. When I left, her firebrand eyes and pitiful smile burned a hole in the back of my shirt. And a second of that pair. Trouble. Everybody tells me the woman is trouble. I know it in my marrow. Brown eyes as kind as consent. When the room, the air grows dank, I realise I must turn and run for cover. Okay, this is a poem, it's a little bit more introspective now. And I think it was originally published in Wide Eyes Publishing, Salt and Vinegar Zine. It's called Troughs. At intervals, the fear that this is it consumes me whole. Flesh, bones, dreams, goals. If only there was a pill I could swallow. If only there was a switch I could flick. Deep, shadowy breaths help restore balance, but I feel certain the day is close. I'm going to read a poem now called Majorettes, which was inspired, excuse me, by my time working as a security guard at one of the, I won't say popular, but one of the most well-known hardy camps in the northwest of England. I remember weekends when troops of dancing girls would offer themselves to men as old as their fathers, run barefoot over sand dunes, while guards in black clip-on ties and starched collars chased them by torchlight. This is a poem called She Was. Sitting across from her, through drunk eyes, provocative, grape hyacinths and Veronica, blue and sweet, the uncomplicated night sky, sweeping, unfurled, infinite. That's about poem. Excuse me, that's a poem about what love could be. And I'm going to follow it immediately with this one called Pain. What hurts more than flowers failing? Knowing that you have been complicit in their death, an accessory. Hi, Di. I've just seen your message pop up. This next poem is called The Wren. I wrote this on a lunch break in my previous job. Um, a day or so later, I picked up Pleasures of the Damned by Charles Bukowski, and there's a poem in there. It could almost be a response to it. It wasn't, believe me, but it's a correlation and a line I like to draw between us. She spent 2 months teasing, immune from attack, hovering from quivering branch to blossoming plant. One afternoon, the child left the window unlatched, and a rapid flash of bright black, vanity extinguished, without trace. A poem now called Snowdonia, another one originally published in Panoply. You tell me if I'm saying that right or not. So as unattainable are those images America from the past and future from film and our social consciousness are those from our own memory. Things are very different in reality. I've tried to capture that here. I remember cleft ranges and wet blue slate in July, sweeping heaths, knots of green and mulberry from my childhood, and I realise how innocence and humour is far removed. Today I could return to those valleys and watch salmon jump in their hundreds, but everything will have changed. My eyes older, silvery rocks more severe, white waterfalls quiet now, and trees whispering no more. The next poem is a poem called Lord Street, which was published in the inaugural edition of the Broken Spine Artists Collective, which is the magazine that I mentioned at the top of this reading that Paul and I set out to create um, just under 12 months ago. We've just finalised all the poem and artwork for issue 2. My contribution to that first publication is called Lord Street. I'll read it for you now. On light evenings, the waterfall is stalled, and straw hat theatre companies put on skits in front of the art centre, passing young couples on first dates, stop to watch. So the next poem in my collection was written after I returned home from a honeymoon. 11 years in the making. My dad and my stepmom offered to have 3 beautiful children for 4 days. I managed to talk it to 7. And rather than going on a quick city break, I managed to whisk my wife away to Cuba. This poem's called In Havana. In Havana, amidst ghosts of writers, stand battle-worn bronzes of revolutionaries. In Havana, locks of cigar smoke drift from old men in white hats sat on wrought iron balconies. In Havana, honeyed air is punctured by the lilt of jazz guitars and rhyme of paired verse. In Havana, elaborate archways are proudly painted in sun-bleached Caribbean pastels. In Havana, people spill from coffee shops, drunk on pulsing beats and the wealth of history. Um, I've got one poem left for you in the collection. You've heard a lot. Um, it's called Wisdom. I think it's a nice way to end, although the subject matter is not lovely. After my mum and dad were divorced, my mum developed a relationship with alcohol that ultimately proved to be her demise. She's no longer with us. She's no longer here to slap me on the wrist and say, no, you can't write that. Um, it's a story that needs to be told, though. This poem's called Wisdom. Mother used to say, everything is different by day, but it was in the evenings she got stupid drunk. Okay. Um, I'm done with reading my poetry, but before I go, I want to say thank you to everybody who's tuned in, everybody who's already purchased a copy of Neon Ghosts. It is available via thebrokenspine.co.uk/store, where you can also pick up um, issues of, or sorry, copies of issue one of our magazine. Both are available. The Broken Spine is self-funded at the moment, but we do also rely on donations from your good selves. So if you're able or happy to um, purchasing one of these, that would be fantastic. Um, but also, there are links to our Patreon page there where you can help us out with just a regular small nominal payment, and that will allow us to put out not only more of my work, but more work from some fantastic emerging artists from the world over, from myriad backgrounds. And we pride ourselves on giving a platform to voices that are otherwise quietened for whatever reason. Okay, thank you and good night.